It's Spoilerin time, folks. I'm Tom Merritt, and today we are going to spoil Season 2, Episode 3 of Deadwood, Episode 10, the season finale of Season 1 of Counterpart, talk about our impressions of the movie Ready Player One, and joining us to do that, who is with us this week? Brian Brushwood, my co-host.
Along with me, who almost got skipped over, it's Jason Howell from All About Android. How are you, sir?
Oh, hello, folks. How's it going? So great to join you today.
Dude, so glad to have you here. Excited to talk about Ready Player One, but first we have to take a brief moment and check in on the summer movie draft.
I remember this drop.
Yeah.
So, Ready Player One, 53 million out of the gate. How are you feeling, Team Night Attack?
I don't know how to feel because now we knew that we got a good price for Ready Player One because it had the potential to have explosive growth, but at $29 game dollars, you know, we really wanted it to hit 150, 160, 170, but 53 on a 4-day weekend opening, a little softer than I'd like. Otherwise, I mean, I could feel like a slam dunk. Pacific Rim Uprising, I think it has the chance to limp up to 60 million or 70 million, which I don't feel bad about. But Ready Player One really needs to show that it's got legs. Luckily, it doesn't look like there's anything structurally similar to Ready Player One on the horizon. Blockers is a comedy, Quiet Places, horror, Truth
Rampage
or Dare
would be an adventure movie, sort of.
Maybe. Okay. Truth or Dare. I think Rampage is the next like slam dunk knock Ready Player One out of the running. But
and that's next week, not this week. So you've got a week gap before Rampage.
Yeah,
Rampage is along.
Yeah, almost two weeks from today as we record this. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. It's not as strong as I hoped.
Yeah, 53 million doesn't seem to be what I think 60 wouldn't have made me blink. I would, 70 would have been good. 80 would have made me raise my eyebrows like, "Oh, it's doing great." I can't tell on Easter weekend if that's oh, well, it was Easter, so people didn't go to the movies as much. It's just it's hard. It's hard to tell, but like you say, blockers, which you also have on your team, so you benefit from whatever it gets, probably not going to steal Ready Player One's audience. It's all going to be about the people who hear the reviews and decide whether they want to go see it or not.
And that's the nice thing is that in general, I'm hearing a lot of pleasantly surprised reactions to it. People who went in not expecting a lot but came away really enjoying it. And, there's always folks who are like, well, that's not the book. I like the book. And that's fine. Those people are begrudgingly saying, hey, it's still pretty good for what it was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the book.
What's funny is A Quiet Place took over, didn't have a trailer before Ready Player One. When I saw it at the Cinemark here, it took over the silence your cell phones spot.
Oh, wow.
So they did if you don't silence your cell phone in the A Quiet Place font with cuts of, the monsters and everything from the trailer. And it was like, turn off your cell phones now. Don't disturb the movie. I was like, that was really clever because it got me got me invested in A Quiet Place a little more. And I didn't have to sit there through the normal, I know. Yeah.
It finally got you to mute your cell phone. Admit it.
No. I actually immediately texted Eileen. It was like, you won't believe it. All right.
I'm finally convinced. Do you think that maybe some of the underperformance has anything to do with the fact that the movie, I mean, it's right there in the title. People who aren't familiar with the book might look at the action on screen in the previews, or might look at the title and be like, "Oh, that's a movie about video games, and I'm not a gamer, so I don't really care about it." Do you think there's any thread of that?
I think that the advertising for Ready Player One is one of the most mixed up hot messes I've seen in the last 5 years. You could not see a single trailer, no matter how many times they threw stuff at the wall to see what would stick, that made any sense or brought you any closer or thought like that's a hook I can.
Right.
They ultimately were just shouting, there's things you'll remember that will show up in it. And it's like, which I can't think of a worse marketing message than.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it really did.
had-
I mean, and the movie itself, I mean, as you're watching it, it's kind of a schizophrenic watch, right? Like there are parts where there's so much visual information that you just don't know where to look because it's everywhere. It's almost like confusing just because they did include everything. Trying to fit that into a trailer that actually speaks to someone that they know, if they aren't familiar with the story or familiar with the book, that they know what they're getting into. About the only thing that they probably have to connect with that gives them any semblance of normalcy is the fact that Steven Spielberg's name is attached to it.
Yeah.
Well, let's stop dancing around. Let's spoil this mother. Ready Player One, I thought was great on my scale of fine, good, great, amazing, mind blowing.
I'm confused.
I was good through most of it, to be honest. I also want to mention that I read the book in August of 2011 when it came out immediately. I really enjoyed it. I understood the people in Sword and Laser, our science fiction fantasy book club, who didn't like it because they're like, it's a too light of a story, and it's all about references. And I knew that some people were not going to like the movie that way. My wife got to see it early. She got to see a preview of it. She came back and I started to say, okay, well, did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? She told me some of the changes and I'm like, that sounds awful. I do not like that we are not seeing Wade go into the belly of the beast. I do not like that he meets Artemis early. I do not like that he gets the quarter from the curator. Like, I do not like X, Y, and Z. And these are all things I've seen people say after they've seen the movie. So I don't know if maybe I would have a different opinion if I didn't know it was coming. But when I watched the movie, it all clicked. It all made sense. I'm like, oh, that's why he's doing it that way. Oh, that's why this is happening. Oh, I guess I don't mind that the curator's doing it because he ties it in later with the curator. Okay, got it. It is a different story in many ways from the book. And if you go in it with the expectation of, I want to see the book on film, you are going to be disappointed. But although I like the story in the book better, I still like the story in the movie just fine.
Yeah, it is a curious case of them scraping 100% off the meat, off the bones, and just say, so now you have a skeleton. It's like, what's left? We've ripped out everything. There are 3 keys, and he's got to get the 3 keys to win the MacGuffin. And there's a love interest and some friends. He gets the first key, someone else gets the second key. The bad guys seem to have the 3rd key, and then they solve the world. And then outside of that, they just filled it in with whatever set pieces would work for movies. And they were like, oh, also nostalgia, lots of nostalgia. And then they basically scrambled and we were like, what can we get? And they were like, well, we can't get War Games. Let's do a thing with The Shining, because that's in our studio umbrella. We can't get to Ultraman. So let's put Gundam on there, which, by the way, you missed a big opportunity. You should have gotten Voltron. I
thought that too.
Well, and didn't they show Voltron at some point? So
I wouldn't be surprised if they left you with the impression that you had seen Voltron, but I watched it twice this weekend, and I saw nary a hint of that in there. But it was fun. It was really, really a blast. I dug it.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway. Not being familiar with the story at all going in. Of course, I'm an 80s kid, I was born in the 70s, but so much of my childhood, like all of the 80s references, I felt like spoke directly to me, as I'm sure a lot of other people in my shoes, the same could be said. So so it kind of tickled your funny bone in that perspective. But I mean, top to bottom, I went in a little worried about the Steven Spielberg aspect of things because he's been very hit or miss. And not to mention, as I get older, some of the things that I used to be captivated about from a Steven Spielberg movie kind of result in eye rolls as I get older, for better or for worse. So I wasn't sure what I was going to get. And it's not the most amazing movie in the world, but it was damn fun. Start to finish, it was just a roller coaster ride the entire way through, and it had me laughing, and I just enjoyed it. And I haven't gone to a movie like that in the theater in a really long time. Once we started having kids, back in 2010, like my movie theater experiences dropped off the face of the earth, and then eventually it's going to see kids movies. So this time my wife and I got a babysitter. We went. I'm so happy we did. I really want to see it a second time. I loved it.
And it stands up a second time. I didn't mind seeing it just a scant 48 hours after the first time. The one character that stole the show, in general, I thought all of the acting was fairly bland. I liked that they reanimated the corpse of the principal from The Breakfast Club to play the bad guy. But there was one character that was just great.
Wait, you mean Director Krennic?
No. Oh wait, wait?
Yeah.
Wait. Oh really? Is that him?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, but I was gonna say IROC. I thought was the one character that I loved, and I love that they spared us the scene of revealing that he was an 800-pound person in his mom's basement, because everything about that was communicated in his smarmy, self-absorbed, smug attitude from the very beginning. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, those of us who've seen Silicon Valley recognize the voice, and we already were picturing TJ. So, like, you did not need to show him. I thought that was a good choice. I definitely thought it dragged in a couple of places, and again, that may be because I sort of know the broad strokes of the story. It certainly is more Spielberg. We get a Spielberg version of a love story in here. We get a message about, you can't always avoid reality. Go outside and see the real life sometimes, which feels very Spielbergy. Did that bother you guys?
Yes. Well,
yes.
I took that to be that because the book is it's very clear that anything that matters at all happens in the Oasis, and Meat Space is just an extra way that we keep our dumb chemical soups alive.
Yeah, it's basically a living nightmare now because the Earth has been ruined or whatever.
Exactly, but it felt to me like they basically tested it on enough audiences that didn't like the idea of like, well, so don't any of them go out you look for the 4 quadrants, the young, old, male, female thing. My guess is one of the quadrants were like, well, it just seems like they should go outside. That's what they should do. And so they just tacked on this, and I wouldn't be surprised if they A/B tested like, well, 3 days a week do they shut it down? 2 days, 1 day? And eventually they landed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're just going to cut out 25% of the GDP of the planet Earth for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
So that my girlfriend can sit on my lap.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I don't think it's a bad message. It was just a very Spielberg way of delivering it. Jason, what did you think?
Well, no, I felt the same way. At the end, it was like, okay, here comes the message, that we just spend too much of our time entranced by technology. But from a non-book, I didn't read the book. I'm very curious. Was that a construct of the film itself, or was that
that was entirely only in the film? And in fact,
That's very Hollywood.
That would have been a horrific sideways turn at the end of the book, given people go to school in the Oasis. In fact, if the book has a message, it's that your relationships in the Oasis are the only real ones, and that everything else, you happen to exchange niceties with this other meat puppet you pass on the street because you have to, whereas meanwhile all of you are shining gods and best friends in some other world.
Yeah. And when he meets Artemis, it's much later in the story in the book, and it's a big deal because it's sort of like, hey, you don't like people because of what they are, you like people because of who they are. The Oasis shows you who they are more so than meeting in real life, and that's what you fell in love with, Wade, aka Parsival. That seemed much more soft pedaled in a movie that, requires a certain level of attractiveness in its actors because it's Hollywood, right?
Yeah. There's no shortage of things I wish I had seen that I did not, but ultimately the movie is good enough that I'm not worried about any of those things. I'm just glad that it exists for what it is, and it was a lot of fun to watch and share with the kids, and it was great.
Yeah, I'm imagining your kids really enjoyed it. I mean, there's just so much in there for kids to connect to. Aside from the fact that it's PG-13, like it would be hard for me to take my 8-year-old and my 4-year-old there. Maybe my 8-year-old would be right for it, but not my 4-year-old.
Yeah, no, my 10-year-old definitely got to encounter a theme park ride of The Shining.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I didn't mind that. I mean, and not from the kids' standpoint, but from the replacing the War Games thing with The Shining.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that segment was well done. I liked it a lot.
Man, I forgot how
and
much.
It was an example of one thing I thought Spielberg did was he muted the referencing a little bit, which I think would have been even more overwhelming if he hadn't, and he broadened it. He moved things a little bit into the 90s, but even more so into the 70s with The Shining, which I thought actually on the big screen played a little more realistic because, none of us grow up in just one decade, right?
Right. What about the Iron Giant? Was that part of the book?
No,
because that's a 90s franchise or that's a 90s character.
Well,
right?
and they didn't. Okay, so the Oasis in the book, the Oasis itself was, because it's, was like basically Second Life, whatever anybody wanted to make, you could buy and have, and there wasn't a lot of respect for intellectual property rights. So as a result, you would see scenes with, the ship Serenity from Firefly next to an X-Wing or whatever. So you already got, a good 40-year spread on there. And Ultraman is what, a 1950s property or whatever. So it was already bigger than the 80s. But the 80s aspect was specifically based on the idea that so in the book
that was
James,
Halliday's obsession.
Correct, but in the book it's very different in that Halliday dies. He says, if you understand me, you'll find the eggs, and so as a result, there's a good 20-year stretch where everybody academically studies all of his youth and all the things that were out during his youth. But then it's very clear that the entire hunt has gotten sleepy before it even begins because nobody's even gotten one key. Nobody's gotten on the board. Nobody's gotten anywhere, and it ends up being Parsifal. It's Wade who, sitting in school, has the epiphany that sort of renews the hunt. So all of a sudden, you have all these latent egg hunters, the Gunters that come out of nowhere and really fight. Whereas the movie's very, very different. It's at the height of the chase. Everybody's in on it, and instead of being a chump with no money, Wade is clearly on his way. I liken it to, in the book, we get Luke Skywalker as a moisture farmer, and we see his journey up to Return of the Jedi. This is like starting at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. He clearly knows what he's doing. He's on this path, and he's already got a lot of muscle under his britches. Is that a thing?
Although he's
say?
broke.
Sure.
I mean, they make a point of saying he can't lead the race because he has to pick up coins. So it's not that they took away that aspect of the story, right?
Sure, but in the case of the book, like, he's got nothing. He's dirt poor, and nobody is in Columbus. They sort of throw this like, Columbus is the #1 fastest expanding city in the planet. That's why we're so excited to be here. We're stacking trailers on top of each other. That's not the case at all. It's like,
no, it's Oklahoma City, and they're stacking trailers because Oklahoma City used to be a boom town, and then it went bust, and nobody can afford to live anywhere anymore.
Right.
I'm still puzzled by the fact that he moved it to Columbus. I'm like, Oklahoma City was just it was such an interesting choice. And it made so much sense to me.
I'm pretty sure Ernie's from Columbus.
What? But Spielberg moved it to Columbus. Is that why?
There's a lot of stuff that seems to have been done to tie it closer to Ernie Klein's personal narrative, from what I know about him.
Why did Ernie write it that way then?
What's that?
It's a weird thing. Why did Ernie write it as Oklahoma City then?
Well, probably because he said, I don't want to look like it's a self-indulgent.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably.
Right.
And
I don't want to be a holiday.
He could write it that way, and then Spielberg could say, hey, kid, come on. A lot of people liked your book. Let's move it to your hometown. Let's tell this story.
And to your other point about, the height of the hunt, they make a point of saying nobody hunts for these anymore except for the professionals. And then it really looks like everybody's hunting for them, right? Like they try to do the same thing in the book of like, nobody's hunting anymore, but it doesn't look that way. So yeah, it's confusing.
One thing I thought was kind of interesting in the whole race, the very first challenge, is that obviously, big time spoiler, the solution is to drive backwards. And
you're like, nobody thought of that? No, not one person.
So think of any gamer that that's played a game a million times. They're bored out of their mind, so of course they're driving backwards and they're going in all different directions. It's going to happen accidentally at least once.
Well,
so it's kind of weird that he nailed it.
The way I wrote that in my mind, because you do a little bit of massaging, I just figured okay, it's a procedurally generated, no two races are the same. It always is different. And the reason people keep coming back is they think maybe this time Kong won't be there. And then this time he was, or if it's not Kong, it's some other thing or whatever. Let's say Kong was one of 17 different end bosses. And that's why he stopped, is because he knew Kong was the one that absolutely couldn't be defeated head on. Like I'm fine with all that. And in that context, I could imagine, I can even imagine that the program would say, well, sure, somebody's going to go backwards for some reason, but only one person will do it because he sees this scene within a week of deciding to go backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever.
Or the path is obviously intentional, And,
exactly. Because if this guy's enough of a genius to write the Oasis, he's enough Willy Wonka to solve any number of plot problems.
Sure.
By the way, Skip Lives reminds me that when Wade goes to the hotel room after he starts making it in the Oasis in the book, that's in Columbus. So he does end up in Columbus in the book. It's just not where he starts. And it sounds like they just collapsed it. Like, let's just put it all in Columbus rather than having to move locations.
Well, and that's another thing is I think on balance, all of the simplifications work and were great. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was just from a licensing perspective alone, what a remarkable feat of legal juggling they had to do to make this happen.
The clearances department for this deserves an Academy Award, like a brand new Academy Award.
Special Achievement Award.
Yeah.
The new Oscar is, holy crap, this happened. They did it.
I don't know how.
Any last thoughts about this, Jason, before we let you go?
No, I mean, other than to say that it was just a great film. Like, it was very enjoyable. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. Cheesy Hollywood moments aside, really there was enough there to distract me from even those cheesy moments. So I loved it.
Brian, any last thoughts from you?
It was great. I'm super proud of my buddy Ernie for doing it, and for I texted him like a month ago saying like, hey, I don't even expect a response. Just know that when the dust settles, I'm looking forward to buying you lunch, because holy shit, you're in for a ride, man. And I'm so excited. It's great.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Jason Howell, thanks for joining us. We're going to let you go, but give people one more reminder where they can find you.
Yeah, just find me on Twitter at Jason Howell. You can find links to all the shows I do for twit.tv there, and the music that I write, yellowgoldmusic.com.
Go get yourself some yellow gold, people. Thank you, Jason Howell.
See you guys. It was a lot of fun.
All right. To the season finale of Counterpart, which honestly, I just want to say is it just really ends up with, they're switching places in more ways than one.
Tom.
Yes, Brian.
Oh, no.
Out of everything on Counterpart, the thing I'm most ashamed of is that we wasted so much time arguing about whether or not somebody could walk down and pick up a body. That was the dumbest argument we've ever had. Because it turns out it's just nonsense. And also somebody just ran down there and got him.
I know. I 100% agree with that, because when he says like, well, when they have the argument in the conference room, like we should go get the body, and the other's like, no, we shouldn't go get the body. I'm like, oh crap, it's me and Brian.
Yeah.
we're in the show.
Well,
yeah.
So here's my current frustration. I think it's a fine technique to withhold information. That's where mystery comes from. That's where engagement comes from. That's we're more excited than questions by answers. But at the end of a full first season, I had really hoped for more answers that would lead to more interesting questions. Mm-hmm. And instead, I understand we're going through a culling process. Let's eliminate Pope. Snip that thread. Let's eliminate whatever allegory on the other side. The guy who gets shot. Snip that thread. Let's tie up in a bow that weak-willed budget Doctor Who and his traitor ex-wife are both in it together, and they're both too stuck to get out. And I think we end up with a pruned and tighter story. And yet I'm left feeling lonelier. It feels, I was hoping that we would get to that in a way that felt expansive, and I can't believe I'm saying this. At least by the end of Westworld, I felt like, well, now anything's possible. And I have a glimpse of the bigger, wider world around me. As frustrating as it was to keep the story small throughout that whole thing, it ended with feeling like everything had busted wide open and we could go anywhere. Now, from the trailers of next season of Westworld, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but at least that feeling of opportunity of being able to go anywhere was very exciting to me. On Counterpart, I understood the trimming of the stories, and here we are with this core stuff, but I'm left feeling like I'm in an even smaller room than I was at any point in the story beforehand. The world, the universe is getting smaller for me, and I find that a bit agonizing. And all of maybe that's their intent. Maybe that's where they want it to go. But it's like even the world universe building aspects of meeting the folks upstairs. It's a Dalek box that goes scamba bamba, and they're like, oh, upstairs wants to know what. I'm like, all right, that's none of this makes me feel like this is a bigger, more interesting world.
Well, okay, there's your problem, right? Because killing Pope is not about tying up the story to me. That's not tidying up anything. Who did Pope work for? There's millions of questions, right?
Sure.
Pope wasn't the whole thing. Killing Pope was showing that our Howard is now a killer, right? Our Howard is Howard Prime. It just hadn't come out yet. I was disappointed that where I thought we were going was where we ended up. That's why I started the conversation with like, oh, guess what? The Howards are turning into each other. Howard Prime puts the flowers in the vase and sits down and starts reading to the wife, who grabs his hand. It's like, oh, he's made more progress. Our Howard ends up, thrown in a box.
Stoic as hell about it. You don't hear him crying or complaining or whatever. He finds the steel within him.
He's the bad guy. So I'm not surprised. And so I'm feeling a lot of the same things you're feeling, which is, okay, I knew that was happening. You've really like made sure I know that was happening, but I already knew that was happening. The big reveals are the squawk box with management and or upstairs, which they almost consistently referred to them as management in the Prime world and upstairs in our world until they mentioned upstairs in the Prime world. And I couldn't tell if that was a mistake or if it was just not really important. That's supposed to open up vistas. That's supposed to be like, oh, now I want to know more. What's going on up there? But like you, I sort of looked at it as like, oh, well, that's kind of silly.
Well,
show me something upstairs delivering that, and maybe I get more interested.
Here's what I'm hoping.
Hold on, just one more thing.
Sure.
The other big thing is the worlds are closed. Closing the worlds, that's a big deal, right? Like, oh my gosh, now they're trapped. Now they can't get back. But ending the season there almost feels like ending a series, not ending a season.
Well, and I think that is a smart move in a world where nobody's guaranteed a second season, is write the first season, hold nothing back. Write it, assuming that it lives on its own merits.
But I think they were already given a second season. Anyway, yeah. No,
wasn't that a news thing? Or maybe I got...
Yeah, they may have already written it before then. It's a good point.
Yeah. So, but regardless, here's where I'm hopeful that we're headed, is that we have a cast of characters, some we like, some we don't like, and we saw good guys versus bad guys, and now enough people are dead that instead we're left with about 5 to 7 characters who we know their name and care who they are. And I would like to believe that the rest of the story is all of them versus the top-down powers that be. In similar to Lost, you thought it was a story about good guys and bad guys. Turns out it's just, all guys and trying to stay alive on this crazy island or whatever.
Yeah, and I feel like Counterpart's strength is showing that there are no good guys or bad guys. There are only people created by situations who tend to do one thing or another. And Howard is the biggest example of that, right? Well, he's the same Howard, but situations here made him this kind of Howard. Situations there made him a different kind of Howard. And when they got put in opposite situations, they started to become the other kind of Howard. Let's see that play out with British guy and his killer wife. Let's see that play out with Assassin Girl. Let's see that play out more. I'm intrigued by that. I would like more pointers that's where we're going, because I would love that. I think them all uniting against, like, they all start to realize, oh, it's up there. That's the problem. That could be super interesting.
Well, and especially if the larger narrative comes, this game of chess. Look, we think that we're playing against each other. We're being played. We're the pieces. This is why the folks upstairs have us constantly at odds against each other, is because they understand that the one smart move is to widen that gap as wide as possible, and both sides to work together and derive all the benefits of free trade or whatever.
And the upstairs people was cut in such a way to sort of lead you to believe it was the same group answering.
Or at least that's an off. I took it to be that in the early days of the split, some certain structures were established that for game theory reasons, both sides have a very good reason to maintain so as not to allow them to tip their intellectual societal hands to the other side.
Yeah, there's some collusion going on. And I wouldn't be shocked if we are shown that there is an area that exists outside the separation.
Oh, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm ready for next season to be like, well, get to the other side. How are we going to do it? They've shut down. They're like, there's more than one portal.
There's another portal, and it's upstairs. Wait a minute. Upstairs exists in both places at once.
That's right.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
What? You could turn off your, what was the screen in 1984?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bryce, any other thoughts on Counterpart?
No, it was a good finale, but I see where you're coming from, Brian, and that it didn't feel. I actually felt like it didn't really it didn't wrap up. There wasn't a big shocker. Like the big moment was that they closed the door.
Yeah.
And the Howards are stuck in their world.
Story-wise, usually they're like, now let's give you a peek into the wider world as possible.
Right.
But instead, it's just like, no, we're eliminating possibilities. We're eliminating characters, plot threads, they don't matter. Also, we're shutting the door between two sides. That's it, and we're done.
Well, and I think...
do you know what the answer is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I'm just getting this from corporate. It says, you'll find out tomorrow on Cordkillers. Patrons find out the answer.
We know.
For a
That's
show...
not true, just in case anyway.
This show... They really hyped up the show about to J.K. Simmons, right? But really, there's only, maybe 10 minutes within this whole season where the two Howards are in the same room even. It's heavier in the beginning, but they very quickly split that party.
He still is the only character that we see both sides of outside of his wife, but his wife is asleep in one world. Everyone else, we don't follow a single other character that meets their counterpart or that we bond with.
That's going to be interesting because it looks like she's going to wake up in our world, and then we have the possibility of them meeting.
Do you think she woke up specifically because she knew it was the right Howard? Was that implied?
You think she was faking the coma?
No. I think a coma is a plot device you get to ascribe all kinds of mystical aspects to, but he went there but never read. And then finally he read, and then she woke up.
I thought he did read.
I thought he read.
I thought that was his whole deal. Is he make sure to read to her, and Howard Prime was like, yeah, screw that.
I don't think
Prime eventually did.
That's what I'm saying. Is I think this is the first time we saw Prime read.
Yeah,
and the moment he reads, she wakes up because, and I'm suspecting because at some story-driven level, she knew that this was the Howard that's worth waking up to instead of her normal Howard.
Yeah. So Howard's gonna wife swap with himself.
I mean, assuming all four parties are consensual, it seems fine to me.
Yeah. Hey, it's alternate realities. It's a different world. Who knows?
Alternate lifestyles.
Yeah, literally. All right, on to Deadwood 203. I don't remember anything. No,
I'll tell you what, man. You remember this one was directed by the team that brought you Hostel? It was just torture porn for an entire hour. Ian McShane screaming as all manner of implements are shoved in his genitals.
Oh gosh, that's why I don't want to remember, because he's on the floor half of it, and there's a graphic depiction of removing kidney stones, I guess.
Yeah,
they're gallstones. I don't know.
Although you never see the kidneys, they're kidney stones, and it's not indicated that they're out yet, but that they've at least he's pee-peed in the potty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say what you will, I prefer 21st century medicine to that.
Doc continues to be great. We get a brief glimpse of the slow opening of the high-end brothel.
Mm-hmm.
And then this business with Mr. W, who
is the same actor that played Jack McCall, which was extraordinarily distracting to me.
Jack McCall in
season 1 of Deadwood.
Wait, it's the same guy who played a different character?
Yeah. Because when he showed up, I thought, oh, Jack's back in disguise. But it's not a very good disguise because it looks just like him, except cleaned up. Oh, wait, it's a different guy. And then I had to go to IMDb and like, oh, yep, same actor. Is just playing 2 different parts.
Okay, I don't like that. and then I guess whatever name of the guy that he works for is like a magic spell that causes everyone to pee their pants.
It is Hearst, George Hearst.
Yeah, and then and somehow Cy like doubles down on his mad descent from the most interesting, threatening, terrifying character to the most cartoonishly incompetent, mewling crybaby of psychosis. I hate Cy. I hate him. How did that happen, Tom? He was the best character.
I mean, there's so many reasons why that may be happening. One of them is Cy is the anti-swear engine, right? Swearengen's the guy who just does what he has to. Cy's the one who does not only what he has to, but some other things because he thinks they're fun, which makes him more dangerous. And then suddenly you say George Hearst and he folds. And that just takes the teeth out of him.
Well, and I think all of this was done to convey the looming credible threat of what is the one thing that could absolutely undo every single scheme and dream in all of Deadwood, and that's to undercut the base of the pyramid, which is the validity of the claims to everybody there. Now, granted, it's pretty clear that this is a disinformation campaign, that this is being sowed to create chaos so that Hearst can come in and buy up everybody's claims and run it as a factory town. But having said all that, you're watching everybody panic and lose their mind.
And the Cy issue aside, Swearingen and Tolliver are not big time bad guys. They're small time bad guys. That's why they're in Deadwood, because they couldn't make it in a Chicago or a New York graft scene. But when there's less competition, they can make it. So it does make sense that as Deadwood receives legitimization from the state, that the people who are good at conducting illegal operations and graft within a legitimate state, which it sounds like Hearst has done in Mexico and the United States, would be attracted to an area that has a bunch of gold.
Yes, although it feels like it might be setting up, and unfortunately, we know that we only get this one season to pan it out, but it seems like the story that they're setting up is like, well, what if them all not doing things the traditional way ends up being a big benefit to all of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. This whole season, stark difference in quality between season 1 and season 2. Like season 2, we're 3 episodes in.
Story-wise,
and I would put all 3 of these at the bottom of the list. I can't think of a single one that's not better than or that is better than any of them from the first season.
Plot wise, I 100% agree. The characters are still great. The acting's still awesome. The cinematography is wonderful. I still enjoy and look forward to watching Deadwood because I'm going to get to spend time. And I'm so glad that Calamity Jane's back because I get to spend time with these crazy characters. They aren't doing as interesting of things
or anything at all. Calamity Jane's story and Trixie's story were to drink and have 2 separate conversations at the other, like Calamity Jane would talk about.
I actually really liked that scene though because they were talking past each other, and Trixie kind of showed that she's maybe a little tougher than even Jane.
Sure. But just, I don't know, nothing progressed. Like we ended the previous episode with Ian McShane, Swearingen bent over in misery, and we ended this episode with him bent over in misery.
What progressed was Hearst. It was all Hearst related. That's the new thing.
The shadow of the boogeyman and the showing up of Mr. W or whatever,
and how he likes to mess with whores, and Janie decides to take that on because she has a death wish, I guess. And then I don't know, that wasn't a bad scene. I just don't quite understand what's going through her head there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know.
All right. Well, folks, we're going to keep watching and keep talking. So keep supporting us at patreon.com/Cordkillers. Of course, if we get to that 1,850 people, we will start breaking down Spoilerin Time into easier to consume chunks if you want to go back and watch stuff with us. And we're doing these 10-minute or so after show discussions where we just kind of go off onto other themes that interest us. And you'll get those as well at patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll talk to you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.